Yes.
Yes, it's
All right,
always
over to
another
you, Jill.
video.
Cool. So I'm just going to introduce Mike Davis Marks. I think it's probably going to take me most of the time of this session to introduce Mike, to be honest. So Mike is MD of a company called Building Pathways. He's also an ex-submariner. He's a leadership coach for a True Leader company. He's former chairman of the Shaping Portsmouth Business and Enterprise team, which is where we met. And he told me yesterday that he's recently co-authored a book on remote working. So, oh, Lord.
Oh, look at him.
I can't see where I am. Somewhere there.
How amazing is that? So, bear in mind, Mike, we've only got half an hour.
No, I'm not. Are you sitting comfortably? I should read to you. Yeah, I hope you don't mind that this is a little bit fun and flippant. It's 4 o'clock now, so I think people would, have a little bit of lightness into it. But funny enough, because you had the brilliant Asif live to start off your Workarama, I thought he was fantastic, actually. And he talked about the future of work. And that's really quite odd, because my article, which I can't find, shows you I haven't opened it very often, is also called The Future of Work in this book. So just to prove that what I'm saying is true, there's my chapter called The Future of Work. Wow. And that's what we're going to talk about, Jill, isn't it?
Yes. So, it's very, very recently published, isn't it, that book? What drove you to it?
Yes, so
to the madness of writing a book.
So I'm involved with a group of people called Leadership Gigs, who one of your earlier speakers, Lucy Barkers, is also a member, and she co-authored a book called Fit for Purpose Leadership 3, and I co-authored the one after that, appropriately named Fit for Purpose Leadership 4. So we were in this scheme, and when lockdown occurred on the 23rd of March, and suddenly people were suddenly faced with the reality of working from home, perhaps for the first time in their lives, if they've not been done that way, we thought it'd be great to get a number of people together who had been working at home for some time to offer some tips and some advice about, what's good about and what's the pitfalls from working from home. So within about a 5-day period, the legendary Andrew Priestley, who sort of runs this, said, let's do a book called Remote Working, and we'll have 25 instances of people that have done it for some time, so they can share that. And we got it out in Kindle version in about 7 to 8 days after the idea was first floated. The article was quite short. There were about 1,500 words each. It wasn't a huge onerous, apart from the editing of it all.
Yeah.
And it then appeared in paperback about 2 weeks later. So it was a very fast from idea to getting it out there, in order to try and help as many people as possible who were suddenly faced with a different situation than they were normally used to.
Amazing. So I guess because of that, you clearly do have experience of remote working, and I guess a submarine is quite remote, but I don't think that's what we're talking about, is it?
No, but there are some lessons in parallel. So just to add some context to that comment, I spent the first 36 years of my adult life in the Royal Navy. It's not surprising in the city of Portsmouth that you might have a naval connection. And I chose to spend, so there's something wrong with me, to spend most of it underwater in nuclear submarines. And I'm very lucky and honoured and privileged to have commanded a nuclear submarine during that time. But being stuck underwater in a cigar tube, a very big cigar tube, for months on end with 120 people, does introduce certain disciplines in the way that you work, and particularly work with other people, that actually I drew quite a lot of insights from that period of my life to when I left the Navy and decided that I wanted to work in a very flexible way, which is what I've done in the last 7.5 years. So actually there's quite a lot of tips from working in a cigar tube underwater as much as there is in the last 7.5 years of this remote working style, or flexible working, but to be more accurate.
So that's quite interesting because I think we all, and then there's quite a few people have commented on that today. The terms are so interchangeable, and it all means something different to everybody. So remote and flexible, what's it mean to you, and what has it meant to you over the years?
Well, so I think to unpick that, actually it's more than flexible, and it's more than remote. It's being able to work differently. So the company I joined when I left the Navy 7.5 years ago, called Ethos, had two main objectives. The first was to work in a way that made a difference. So what we wanted to do was work that made a difference. That was objective one. And the second objective was to work in a way that was a better way of working. And we were willing to experiment in how to do that better way of working, which meant, first of all, working from home, so remote working, but allowing a flexible style of working so that actually you weren't tied to a 9-to-5 calendar. In fact, we completely turned the whole idea of how you work for a company upside down by saying, actually, we're not really going to measure work by how much time you spend on it. We're going to measure work by what outcomes you achieve, what value you create. And when I say value, I'm not really talking about monetary value. I'm talking about much wider than that, social value. So and then we said we'd allow our peers decide, what that value was worth in terms of a salary. So we instigated a peer-to-peer remuneration, which said our peers would judge what we did and then value that in monetary terms, in terms of how much we get paid. So my experience of remote working was flexible working, peer-to-peer remuneration, and also with a goal of outcomes rather than time. So time became less important. Actually, if you could achieve great outcomes for 50% of the working week, then that was fantastic, because that's what, how many people go to an office and just shuffle emails around and actually achieve nothing? It's about what you achieve and being measured by your peers about what you achieve, rather than actually, a particular type of schedule or way of, where you work. And just to finish on this particular point, our sort of guide, but not that we were scrupulously, 100% following, was a book by Frederick Laloux called Reinventing Organizations, which talked about this thing called Teal organizations. And we set out to make ourselves into a Teal organization, which is much more than just remote and flexible and peer-to-peer. It's got a whole range of, what are the social benefits that you're trying to derive in the way that you work as well. And although we weren't rigid to that, it was a sort of broad heading, that we were wishing to travel in.
And it's a very interesting book. If anybody hasn't already read it, it's definitely worth looking at. Caroline and I have both read it, and certainly one of the things that appeals to me about it is it's got lots of pictures and not too many words.
Well, I'm a Savariner, so if you can colour them in, it's even better,
So it's a great book from that point of view. But when I read it, what I thought about the Teal Staff was, I sort of looked at it and thought, yeah, I can see that it's completely workable for a small organisation. I'm not sure how it translates to big organisations. So I know that the example that they used was actually quite a big organisation, and it was lots of nursing teams. But I sort of looked at it and thought, yeah, I can totally see that would work with people that are really that dedicated to the work that they do. But if you just put it into some sort of bland organisation, huge bland organisation, I sort of looked at it and thought, I'm not sure whether that would work, and whether or not you do need more of a top-down management structure.
Well, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but what you're talking about is Bertzorg, which is in the Netherlands. And the small teams it combines healthcare and social care, recognising that the two are very independent of each other, which we largely don't do in this country. We have them as separate entities, funded separately from different budgets. And apart from an experiment that happened in Manchester a few years ago, they haven't really, they aren't really trying it very hard. But whereas you're right, it's quite difficult for such a big organisation. But what Birdsong did about 3 or 4 years ago was just start off with a small organisation, and it grew very rapidly because actually it's what people wanted. And more importantly, it was very effective. It was really effective. And I think, maybe one of the lessons from COVID is actually that the integration of social care and healthcare is really, really vital if we are to try and help people the best we possibly can. I tried to, or my company tried to get Birdsong experimented, trialed in the UK. And, you know what it's like dealing with big, large governmental bureaucracies. It's like wading through treacle. So everyone said, oh yeah, that's a good idea, and then nothing happened. So I completely agree with you, but we shouldn't stop trying.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in terms of leadership challenges, obviously you're a leadership coach. What challenges do you think there are in that sort of model of working? What have you found? And my next question, which is part of it, is are they paying you well? They've decided what they're going to pay you, but, is it enough?
Yeah, well, it depends who you ask. My sons don't think it's enough because I'm not going to give them every variation of Xbox they want. But I think if you're moderate in what your needs are, then it certainly has been enough. And I've never been driven by money anyway, so it's not been a major issue. So talking about leadership is about talking about people. And in this respect, there are a lot of surveys that say that 72% of people feel disengaged with work at the moment. This is pre-COVID-19. These are the sort of studies that came out by Ernst & Young and McKinsey in the sort of late 10s, so 2017, 2018. And another survey by one of those, Ernst & Young as well, also said that 71% of people who move jobs, they did a study of 10,000 people, but 71% of those that move jobs cited their boss as the main reason for leaving. So we have a problem in the way that people are engaged at work and the way that people are led. There's a misconception about what the difference between leadership and management is, but leadership is all about people. It's about recognizing that people are so much more than a number on a spreadsheet, that actually people are the greatest asset that any company, big or small, ever has. And the more you invest in people, the more you'll get out. And actually, funny enough, productivity, recruiting, all of those win, and the bottom line gets bigger. So my leadership is all about, what I learned from the Navy predominantly, about how you treat people as the most important asset. And the more you can engage people with work, the more you can empower them, the more you can develop them, put your time into investing in them, the more you'll get out of it, and you'll have a happy organizational company as a result of it. And I think that matters. It doesn't matter if you work in an office or you work remotely. It's true of everything. Investing in people, it's a bit more challenging when you're doing it remotely. If you've got, my organization has people scattered around the UK mainly. There's one in America as well, and there's one in France, but mainly around the UK. And so you can't necessarily get that face-to-face contact, in order to, socialize, but you have to work at it differently with remote working. But it's just as important to make sure that people feel valued and recognized and rewarded. Of course, peer-to-peer remuneration helps here, because actually it's your peers judging what you do. So it all comes sort of comes together. And I think it's quite radical, but it works. And it has worked for me for the last 7.5 years, and I'm very happy.
And so how do you create that sort of that team spirit? What do you do in terms of onboarding people? Do you get together at some times, or are you remote all the time?
Well, pre-March the 23rd, we used to meet once a month in London for those that can make it. London, because it was the most central and easy to get to. And we would have a day of sort of management board meetings, all partner sessions, just in the same room. We'd hire a room. We don't have an office. And then we'd go out and socialize and go for a drink, and then go for something to eat, so we'd spend time together once a week. But but in between,
Once a week or once a month?
once a month, sorry.
Once a month, yeah.
It was on the first Wednesday of the month. We used to call it first Wednesday, really. No, so, but on a daily basis, meetings were run virtually amongst huddles of people that were interested in whatever it was we were talking about, and except where it came to personal information, which obviously needed to be protected. Essentially, people could put their hand up and say, "I want to join into that huddle or that group," and because actually, the more diverse the audience, the more different perspectives and viewpoints that we have, the better the solutions tend to be in what we were trying to come up. It was a very collaborative way of working.
It's obviously the tech that's allowed you to do that. What tools do you use in terms of collaboration?
Well, you're right. I think it is technology and the rapid change in the last 20 years that have allowed this way of working to become more predominant, and for people like me to sort of use them. So there's no great secrets here. We've tried to get away from email. We find email it's quite too binary a system. So we use a platform like Slack, and your Flex platform looks quite similar, but it's a way of getting discussions around certain topics that are much more the way that people talk and communicate than they would be if it was just sending an email. And we still email externally, but we use a platform like Slack for internal and everything. And we work in the cloud, so all of our documents, and we happen to use Google. Other systems are available, so we write Google documents, Google Sheets, etc., do all our presentation, and it's all stored. And so you can be working on one device in, let's say, this office here, and then you have to go somewhere else, and you can be working on your phone or an iPad or something, or your laptop elsewhere. So it's all connected. So it's a very joined up way of working. And what I really like about working this way is that you can be working on a document with somebody else at the same time. So actually, when I first did this 7.5 years ago, and watched somebody else's cursor with their name on it going around a document that we were reviewing together, and then they would change something, and I thought, why have you done that? So I just click the Skype button then, and other systems are available, and just say, why have you done that? In the way that you would do, popping your head up in an office, an open office, and say, why have you done that? But it just becomes normalized way of doing it. You just happen to be 75 miles away, from each other. But I loved it. It was real time. It was collaborative. And actually, when I used to write papers when I was in the Ministry of Defence in the Navy, it would take 3 months to get a paper from from a blank sheet to getting something signed off, because there'll be so many layers that people had to do, and every layer felt they had to put their own footprint on it, so they made changes to it, and then maybe the next layer undid some of those changes and went back to the original. But it took 3 months for a paper, and I found that we could do the same amount of work in half a day, a morning, just by being collaborative. So it's hugely much more efficient as well.
No, as you say, it's just real time. It's instant, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think the very interesting thing about the COVID thing, I mean, there's lots and lots of interesting things about it, but if you think about if this had happened 10 years ago, oh my God, we would have been so stuffed, wouldn't we? The way that we work has been made so much easier, because we have had all the technological advances that have allowed us to actually make that switch really quite quickly. But there must be some, it can't all be rosy. I mean, there must be some challenges within the way that you work. What would you say they are? Or maybe you don't think they are. Maybe it's all wonderful.
I'd be hard pressed to find, some downsides. People talk about the banter in office, but you can have a banter on Zoom. We've been having a banter on this call.
Yeah.
And as long as you're tuned to this way of working, then there's no reason why you can't have that water cooler moment virtually just as much as you do. to me, if there are downsides, they've been vastly offset by the many positives. Like, I mean, I've got teenage children still, despite my elderly, my age, and I've been able to, watch them, mature into, well, that's a euphemistic word, mature, when it talks about my sons, but
Hopeful
mature
word.
teenage boys. I've been able to go to cricket matches, rugby matches, things like that, and be with them as part of this flexible, which I could never have done if I'd gone to an office and not been available. I've been able to pop out to the shops and get something for my lovely wife, again, because it's flexible working. So I think the advantages are so much greater. But I will say it's not for everybody. Some people need more structure in their lives, and they may not be. It may not be the best. So this is not a panacea for everybody. But what I do think is that COVID-19, for all its horrors, there are some positives that come out of it. And I think some people would have discovered remote working for the first time, who actually might decide to stay that way of working, when we're allowed to go back to offices and things like that. I think this might be, there was an increase in remote working or flexible working, of about 150% in the last 12 months anyway. But I think this will accelerate it. And I think this is one of the silver linings that have come out of the COVID era, is that actually remote work, more and more people will take to remote working. As I said, it's not for everybody, but I think for some people that haven't done it before, actually they will take to it. And if they need any further advice, then there's a very good book written about how to do it. And actually, just while we're on it, so I know that I'm live, also, this is not prepared earlier. So we talk about, the silver linings of COVID-19. Well, I'm producing a book called Silver Linings, co-editing with another, and co-authoring 20 or so articles about all the good things that have come out of. So that will be in a Kindle in about a week's time. So,
in a good bookstore near you.
Yeah, it is. Does that answer your question, Jill?
No, I completely agree. I think there is loads of silver linings, definitely. I think you nicked that from me, because I've been using that word quite a lot in my Workarama podcast. So you definitely nicked that from me. But I think it's just opened up the conversation. It's allowed people to ask for flexibility, and all right, we were technically allowed to ask for it before, but I do think it'll just be like, it's just completely normal, and not everybody's going to want it. There's going to be some that will absolutely rush back to how it was before. They're sort of chomping at the bit, they just can't wait. But there'll definitely be others that have loved it, and then everything in between, because we are just human beings. And I guess that was one of the questions I was going to ask you in terms of recruitment, is whether or not you've had people that have gone, come to your organisation and thought, you know what, no, this really isn't for me. It's not going to work.
Oh yes, that's certainly true. Far fewer than the people have come to us that say, "Wow, I didn't know you could work this way. This is really." So the pendulum is definitely in favour of people being surprised by how beneficial this way of working is. But there are people that really desperately need really a structure and a place to go to.
Yeah.
The place is important to them, and feel lost without it, however much the benefits are. And so it isn't for everybody. And we have had a few people, not many, that said it's not for me, and we respect that, because we recognise that's the case.
Okay, so I guess just to wrap up, Mike, if you could give us one silver lining from that Kindle book that you've got on your shelf there, what would it be?
The article I wrote in that book is about Captain Sir Tom Moore, but not specifically about him, but why the nation was so galvanized by this 99-year-old, now 100 veteran, walking 100. We were, and I, there's a bit of neuroscience and working out why people were just gasping for some positive news in a time of gloom and doom, and then slightly chiding the mainstream media and quite a lot of our citizen journalists using social media for just peddling the gloom further, rather than just looking for all the good things that are happening, like the breakout of community spirits, like the reduction of air pollution at the moment. And why can't we use that as an opportunity to keep it that way, rather than go back to pre-toxic, pre-COVID toxic levels of things like that? So the one thing I would say, the one tip I would do, is always think about what you can do, not what you can't do. So COVID changed the rules in terms of what we could do, and unless you were a key worker or a hero on the front line, actually, you were forced to, initially in the first phase of this, to stay at home. So don't ask what you can't do, say what can I do, or what can I adapt in order to do. So it's all about being can do, not can't do. That would be my one statement. Be positive about what you can do.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, well, anybody that's entrepreneurial is always going to think that way naturally anyway. But Mike, that's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been very, very good. We've thoroughly enjoyed it. Has anybody got any questions for Mike?
I think Adele did, but she was wanting me to not have the camera on, I think.
Yeah, so an observation, just because we deal with large corporations and sellers with our negotiating with backbone workshops, and we're doing them virtually now. What I've noticed is that some of our companies, sellers are typically spread out anyway, not in an office, but they're craving connection, and training is actually helping them. But what we've noticed is that the coaches that we use for this training are not spending enough intentional time. I think they're still in the mindset of running into each other in the hallway. So just some thoughts from you on like coaching in a virtual environment.
Well, I mean, funny enough, I found that coaching in a virtual environment has improved because you're cutting out the travel, the commute to where you need to be, and therefore you've got, you're not having to rush. You're not thinking about where do I need to be next and having to spend time going from A to B. So actually, I've done quite a bit of coaching now where the audiences that I've been coaching have been bigger. If it's been one to many, have been bigger than I originally thought, because because they're at home, they've got nowhere else to go. They haven't got any. They're going to travel to it. There's not an effort to do it. They just need to switch on Zoom or Team or whatever platform we happen to be using, and be there. So actually, I think the important thing about coaching virtually, which you always get face to face, is to make sure it's interactive. So when you do coach, coaching should be 2/3 listening, 1/3 speaking. You've got 2 ears and a mouth and use it in that proportion. So it's about making sure that everybody that you're coaching it's interactive. They're participating. They're engaged. They feel they're contributing to it. And you have to learn to do that virtually. It's not natural. It's easy just as talk, or put a presentation up and just go through it. But with a bit of practice, and help is always available if you ask for it. You can make virtual coaching really work really well, really effective. Does that answer your question, Adele?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your answer. Thank
Any
you.
help I can give you, I'm sure Caroline and Jill will give you my contact details.
Yes, I'm sure.
Or Adele, if you're ever able to finally visit, we can take a walk and visit Mike's house.
That would be great.
Drink wine.
Yeah, and drink wine. That's for sure. All right, I think that's it then, isn't it?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much, Mike. That was really, really good. And we'll see you on the dog walk or something soon.
Yeah, I think I'm going to popping out. It's not raining now, so I can pop out and give Pip a quick walk around the dog park. And I know Caroline, you both know what that means.
I do. All right, nice to see you.
Okay, thank you.
See you later. Bye.